So we're going to have the panel just give brief remarks, and then we're going to open it up to questions and answers. I've got several questions, and I hope you do too. So we'll start out with Maceo.
Okay, thank you, Gary. It's a pleasure to be here today. I love following Hal. I've done that on several occasions. He never ceases to amaze me. A lot of the comments that were made earlier, I think, were pretty much on target. As far as I'm concerned, there's some key things that every community or every area should sort of look at and concentrate on, especially as they try to make a determination as to what they want to be when they grow up. Reflecting on a comment or two that Hal made, especially as it related to targeted industries and the targeted approach for what communities would like to have their area become, it's not about what you would like to see, it's about what you can support. That, I think, is one of the areas that most folks lose focus. It's, oh yeah, we'd like to be a community or an area that's known for pharmaceuticals, because there's always a need for new drugs and new development in that area. But if you don't have the support necessary to support that and to create that, then obviously that's not one of those areas that you can be successful in. So I will say, whatever that area is or whatever it is you'd like to become when you grow up, be sure that you can be competitive in that area regardless as to what it is. There's been a lot of discussion concerning diversification of your economy. I've listened to several people here today, and I have a tendency, in spite of what most people say, I do listen a lot. But I'm more interested in hearing what general conversation is than anything else. It surprises me a little bit that there are individuals that are willing and eager to sort of kick tourism to the side. I think that would be a big mistake on your part. I do think that there's some ways in which you may want to look at it in a different manner. And I guess probably the best scenario that I can give you for that would be maybe the Marriott hotel chains. You know, you look at Marriott, and you can stay at a JW Marriott, which is probably the top of the line. You could stay at a Marriott hotel. You could stay in a Courtyard. You could stay at a Fairfield Inn. There are different degrees, different areas of tourism that you can also focus on. And I would urge you to take a little bit of a more in-depth look at what that has to bring. Today is a little bit different from the way in which I normally address groups like this, because I usually ask one question, and it's sort of a rhetorical question. In Horry County's case, it's a given, but this is the question. What is it that you have in your community or your county that nobody else has? And if you can answer that question in all sincerity, that'll give you a good start as to where you want to be. Horry's a little bit different. You have an ocean. Not everybody has an ocean. So how do you capture that and take advantage of that and make it be to your credit? I will say that that Brad has done an excellent job as he's come on board here. Some of that diversification is starting to take place, which I think some of you have seen or at least have heard that's getting ready to take place. That's a great benefit to you. Part of that, I think, also has to do with the county leadership understanding their responsibility. And part of that responsibility has to do with long-term economic development funding. What is it you want to do? How do you want to go about doing it? And let's commit to it for not just the short term, but for the long term. There are a number of other things that I'm sure we'll address today, but I think that from opening comments, that's where I'll conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I was joking with my wife last night that I'd have the opportunity to sit on stage in a panel with three heavyweights in economic development. She looked at me and said, "Don't worry, honey, you're the heaviest of all." But I didn't know whether to thank her or... It is a thrill, though, for my wife and my family to be in this wonderful community, the land of milk and honey. It's been the best year and a half of my life, professionally, personally, and in all areas. One of the neatest things that drew me to this community was the leadership. I get to work for a gentleman in the back, Mr. Doug Wendell, who has done so much for this community, and Billy Alford and Dr. Dave DeCenzo, and all the leadership that has galvanized into this new program that we're so proud of as we're moving down the road. And I hope you all are starting to see and hear some of the good things that are going on. But when I was interviewing for this job, I'd never seen a community that was positioned to grow and excel and really just expand the economic development more than this community. And it's been fun getting in here over the last year and starting those things to really help us expand. Dr. Salvino mentioned the labor variability in Horry County and the seasonal impact of our unemployment rates. And I think one of our biggest challenges is to expand and diversify. We can outthink the whole wide world when it comes to tourism. We're number 3 in the country, behind Orlando and Las Vegas. 15 million visitors a year, $110 million expansion at our airport, 65 miles of pristine coastline, all of the great things that are going on. One thing I think we haven't done as good a job, though, is creating the stability in the workforce that we need with manufacturing and aerospace and technology and corporate headquarters, and identifying and developing those opportunities for those young men and women that graduate from this incredible institution, and they have to go off to places like Atlanta and Hal in the Upstate for places of better opportunity. So we're investing in their training, and then we're sending them off for their career. That doesn't make much sense to me. I think we need to change that. One side effect of being a leader in the country in tourism is you have one of the lowest average wages in the country. And so out of the 370 metropolitan statistical areas in the country with at least 70,000 people in the workforce, Horry County, South Carolina is dead last in average wage. And so we've got a lot of work to do in order to catch up and to create some good jobs. The average manufacturing breakdown in the state is about 14% manufacturing. We're 4%. So we'd have to create 10,000 new jobs just to bring our community on average with the average manufacturing labor force in the state. So we're not very diversified. We've got a long way to go to catch up. But the good news is we're catching up. And we've come a long, long way. Before Mr. Wendell and our new board was reconstituted, our EDC averaged about 110 new jobs a year. I want you to think about that. When you're one of the top 30 fastest growing communities in the country, when you have, Dr. DeCenzo, 1,000, 2,000 young men and women graduating from Coastal every year, and you're creating 110 new jobs, that doesn't quite work out very well. And so we know what our target is. We've got a long way to go, but we're getting there. We've announced 315 new jobs since January. We're on track to announce 1,400 new jobs this year, which will be about 15 years worth of average production out of our economic development program. So I hope you all can get excited about that, believe in what we're doing, get on board. We have nearly tripled our EDC local private sector membership since in the last 10 months. The business community is getting on board, getting excited about what we're doing. For the first time, I think, in our county's history, I was telling these guys earlier, we are on track to be one of the top 3 or 4 largest job producers in the state. And I can tell you, I don't know if that's ever been done in this county from a non-tourism job growth standpoint. So We're going to have a lot of announcements this year, and not a single one of them will include a Ferris wheel or an amusement park. And those are all critical, but we're excited about the non-tourism job growth that we're going to see this year too. And I'm just proud to be on the team, and thank you for all you do to support our program.
Thank you, Brad. And Mr. McKay, if you would, please.
Sure. Good morning. Thank you folks for having me here. And the ideal situation for me would be to yield my time to Hal, because I think a lot of what I was going to talk about, Hal has covered. Certainly Maceo followed up on it, and Brad is putting it in place. Just a couple of I guess items and observations that I have that I'll touch on briefly. You've already heard them. And then maybe a recommendation or so that I'd like to talk about, though, is we talk about economic development and you want to diversify, you want to do things, you want to go a different direction. Well, I've always learned that in order to get somewhere, if you have a destination, it's a lot better to have a roadmap on how to get to that destination. And I think Horry County has that roadmap. You've done a strategic plan. You've done a target industry study. You've got the data and things in place that roadmap or that plan is being followed now. I think Brad and his group is doing a good job at, it was about a year ago, I guess, Brad, doing a strategic plan and now executing that plan. So I think you're going to start seeing some of these things happen relative to diversification and some of these targets that you're trying to achieve. The other thing is, and Maceo touched on this a minute ago, is don't try to be something you're not. You've got some wonderful assets and attributes here. Build on those. Go in a direction that you can be successful in promoting those strengths. If you want to go a different direction and you want to target some high growth areas in the future, work on those weaknesses or work on those areas that you need to develop in order to go in that direction that you think is out there, a high growth target, so that as you're promoting one side, building the other side at the same time, but you'll see successes. Don't be afraid to do something different. And I tell all the counties that we represent, you know, if you're doing the same thing your competition is, there's a guy right here that's probably going to be able to go in, has already been there and promoting the same thing, but that gives your company or the target you're going after really two decisions to make. So carve out your niche. Don't be afraid to do something different. And I think you'll find that you'll be more successful in helping that client to make a decision when he's only got really one decision or one choice to make. Talk about diversification a little bit further, prepare for it. We saw sites, buildings, that's critical. I know Brad and I have this conversation quite frequently. We get a lot of looks for this community. Problem is, we don't have a lot of places to put them. I think our numbers show somewhere in the 75 to 78% of our inquiries are looking for an existing facility when they inquire into our region. And contrary to what you might think, our region doesn't have a lot of Class A, Class B buildings for that matter to put somebody in. I know we've struggled with that here. County Council has given Brad and his group a budget, though, to start addressing that. So when you see conversations centered around developing properties and developing buildings, I know you get some negative feedback from time to time, but it's needed. And the folks that we see want that when they come into the door. So I think you have to take those steps. Promote yourself to your targets. I think if we're, a lot of times we do a scattershot approach to any and all things to any and all people. If you've got a target of aerospace companies, then let's target, and that's what we're trying to do with NISA to help you enter those markets, but target yourself in the aerospace arena, to the aerospace audience, to the key factors that are going to help those guys that they're going to be looking for, those men and women in that industry, to make a decision to locate in your community. As I say, don't take a scattershot approach, because 9 times out of 10, it's a very general approach that doesn't answer the specific question that those folks are going to need to make a decision in your community. And this is something that I've said for a while, you know, and Hal and Maceo both pointed to it as well. It's not a tourism or manufacturing market, or a tourism or call center market. It's a tourism plus message. And I think you have the best tourism marketing group probably in the Southeast, or tourism marketing message of anybody I've seen in the Southeast. If we go worldwide, or certainly domestically, and talk to 100 people, I'll bet you all 100 people know Myrtle Beach. And they know Myrtle Beach because it's a great place to visit. Well, you know what? It's also a great place to do business. And we probably need to work a little harder to marry that message and that tourism machine, that tourism marketing machine that you've got, take advantage of the strength that's already in that and get our story out. And we're trying to do that more. I think you've got tremendous tourism partners down here that are doing that, and we probably need to do a little bit better job regionally. I know Brad's doing some good things in that, but regionally we need to do a little bit better job in marrying those two messages together and take advantage of the strength that we have in that. Skipping through, like I say, some other things that you've already heard. One thing I want to hit on here, and Hal pointed it out very well, but I want to reiterate it. You can't be afraid to make the tough decisions. You know, in today's environment, when we're talking about spending money, it always raises the hair on the back of people's necks, or they step back and throw their hands up. Well, sometimes, you know, you got to spend money to get where you want to be. And if you look at the expenditure of dollars as an investment versus an expense, and you can show the return on that investment, I think you'll see long term you're better off for doing that. So I think we have to take that in consideration, and we've got to spend, you know, a lot of times we've got to spend some dollars that we don't necessarily want to do, but to have an impact long term. And political decisions, same way. Sometimes there's when we're making the tough choices, the political fallout, at least on the short term, is challenging, is difficult. But keep in mind, we're doing it for a long-term payoff. And I'm going to close with saying that, you know, we're not in an instant, everything that we're doing up here is not for instant gratification. If you think economic development, you're going to do something today that's going to have a big announcement tomorrow, you're totally wrong. We're in a field that if you do something today and you get a payoff 18 months out, chances are that's been a pretty quick return. So, you know, let's take things in the term of or see things in the terms of long-term payback. You know, 5, 10 years. I know it's tough, and the pain between those points can be excruciating, but just keep in mind what we do today is going to pay off 5, 10 years out. So it's not an instant gratification process. So with that, I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Jeff. Hal, do you want to add anything to what you've already said?
Well,
I'll a bunch, by the way.
I'll just echo real quick on two things Jeff said. Product development is absolutely key. I mean, if you can get someone interested to come see your community, but yet you have nothing to put them in, they're gone as quickly as they get here. So you have to invest in that infrastructure, and understanding that the infrastructure that you're investing in today isn't, you know, every time I drive through, I believe it's Aner, and I see there's a old textile facility that's there. Ceiling heights might be 8 foot in the office and maybe 12 foot in the outside. And I've been telling our guys in the upstate, those buildings have to go. We can reuse the brick, we can reuse the steel, but the real estate's more valuable for a 30-foot ceiling height. And the average facility that we're seeing today is requiring at least 28 feet in ceiling heights, and that's just the going. And Mesa could give you a better value on what the state's looking at, but certainly in our 10 counties, I can tell you the average facility that we're looking at is between 50 and 80,000 square foot, and most of our developers won't build anything less than 30 or 36 foot in ceiling heights, because they have a whole lot more flexibility if whatever goes into it decides to go away. Second thing is that, you know, government, as you think about creating a portfolio product, and that's product is land, industrial parks, it's spec buildings, it's incubator space. You know, your product diversification is what, first of all, your target markets require them to be. So you need to understand that you can start with one, but you got to find other resources to build the next one too. And it's real important that you don't wait until it's gone to start building that, because that's when someone else is going to eat your lunch in the next opportunity. It probably follows the other one. So continue to invest in yourselves. At some point, the private community will take over that investment, and you won't have to. Government leads the way in that, but then typically gets out. That's where government can really help in the economic development process to spur product development activity. We certainly saw that in Orangeburg. We built a 450-acre park. Maceo was, man, he was my crutch. He was everything to help us understand that we had to pull water and sewer out there. We had to buy the land. And then that wasn't enough. Then we had to find $1 million to build a building. And we just thought that was going to tear apart everything that we'd created. But darn, 3 walls were up and the roof was going on, and we got our first deal in that building. And if we wouldn't have had it, we'd have never gotten a look. And so that's the key with product development. You got to invest in it. The second thing I would say is that you know, with everything that y'all have done in your strategic planning is right on. You've got to have that plan in place. Jeff's said it. Both Horry County and NISA have their target industry groups. Those target industry groups, just like ours in the upstate, overlay each other. There are roles in each area in which you can be successful in those, and making sure that the team works as a team on that marketing side. The target industry groups aren't just an indicator of what you think you can. There's a lot of research that goes into all the assets that support that. And remember what those assets are. It's the human assets, it's the training assets, it's existing industry, it's the research components that tie into it, it's the quality of life that will support around those things. So there's a lot of things that develop those target groups. They didn't just throw a dart at the wall to say we're going to be #1 in aerospace. They understand that you have the infrastructure here in the airport facilities, not just here in Myrtle Beach, but in Florence and in other locations to support potential airspace related activities. Go after those. You've got that. Not only that, but how many retired military pilots do we have in the community? I know we've got one, but how many others do you have? How many other military assets do we have that retired here? So think about those assets that can help from the defense side. That's it.
Thank you, Al. We'll open it to questions now. Be delighted to take any from the audience. I have a couple for them, but I don't want to steal your thunder. We told you everything you needed to know? Rob?
No one else has one. I've got a question.
Go for it.
Really curious about tech development. You talk about product development. Can you give specific examples, maybe from Greenville or Orangeburg, where the private sector, we have a lot of developers in the area that are really starving to continue doing things and looking for opportunities, partnering with banks. Just how could that be put together in action to try to help facilitate those efforts?
Well, I'll just give you a couple examples. Let's use Lawrence County as one example, and I used them earlier today. Lawrence is created a portion of their of every deal that they do. So every fee in lieu that they do, they've taken a percentage of that fee in lieu and they've set it aside for product development. It's pretty ingenious. Greenville County's done the same thing, but they put it into an infrastructure bank. Spartanburg County's done the same thing. But let's take Lawrence. So with that, those revenues that they generate out of a portion of the fee in lieu stream, remember, every time they do a fee, these are new revenues that have come to the area. So they weren't there before. They're not taking anything away from the school systems. They're not taking anything away. These are all new revenue streams that are there. So they set these revenue streams after a period of time aside to either buy product, do all the engineering of those sites. When I say buy product, they first start with sites. So Lawrence County right now probably has about 2,800 acres of land in their inventory. They own it. Between them and the city of Clinton, they own a significant amount of property. Now with that, they determine which ones, and they have groups like McCallum Sweeney or Duke Energy or some of the other resources come in and determine which of these sites are best suited for the next development. So they force rank their sites, and they look at what industry sectors they are best suited for. And so it's a very strategic process. It takes time. But now, I mean, when you look at the public property that they control, ZF, which now has a facility, before they even actually produce the first 9-speed transmission in that plant, they'll probably have about 1,200 people on the payroll. The facility's about 1.5 million square foot. Had they not had controlled that property, we wouldn't have won that project in the upstate. Would not have even happened. It made the time for the decision process to be done very quickly. Lawrence has also done something pretty creative. They couldn't afford to build a spec building because they'd spent most of their money on the property. So they went out and did a partnership with a local developer to do a virtual spec. So they've gone through and they've dedicated a piece of property, and then on that piece of property, the county has committed that if a project comes, then they will participate in the land piece of this. They didn't say they'd give it to them, they'd participate. In some cases, and in most cases, Lawrence is actually given the property and for the opportunity. And then they will, the developer will come in and literally get the site pad ready. So they will go out and do all the primary grading for that. They've done all the geotech work. All the engineering has been done. The architectural renderings of the building, that's, I think in this case, it's 60,000 square foot. It's literally ready to go. And so from time they pull the trigger, they can actually be inside that building in less than 4 months. But if you started from raw, you're talking about 8 to 9 months to be inside that same size building, and that gets them into the marketplace quicker. So again, it's being creative with the opportunities that are out there. Spartanburg County, on the other hand, has private developers, and they will use somebody like Johnson Development to come in and build spec buildings for them. There's new land holdings. If you've got an old Milliken facility or an old Milliken site in your community, more than likely that property doesn't belong to Milliken Corporation. It belongs to Packlet Milliken, which is their real estate arm. And that group is looking to redevelop the communities in which have been devastated by the loss of their mills. So they've got opportunities to put funding in. So it depends on where you are to how much public sector side is married with the private sector side. In some cases, in ours in Orangeburg, the first spec building we built, when we sold it to Lennox International, who went into that facility, and by the way, they went into it while they were building another 350,000 square foot facility. So we leased it to them for $1 a year, and then at the end of that year, they had to either buy the building for us or lease it at market from us, or buy it at market value. And so they chose to buy the building for the cost we had in it, which was $1 million. We took the $1 million and set it aside in an account to actually cover carrying costs for the development of a new spec building. And we had that at that time where no private developer wanted to invest in it. We had 4 knocking down our door, and we got to choose which one built the spec building inside the industrial park. So it worked out very good from that point forward. So there's lots of different magic in the hat of how you can make these things work. You pull your economic developer, your regional, you pull all your resources from your utilities, your county, anybody who can put money into the thing, your banking community. It's certainly a partnership. It's not going to happen just the government doing this.
I see a few blank stares here. Does everybody understand what we're talking about when we use the term product development and spec building? Okay.
Yeah, we have a living example right here. I just wanted Brad and Jeff to comment on it, and also picking up on your thing about Painter and the building in Highway 501. If you turn before you got to that on 319, you would see there's a major product and infrastructure piece there. First question is, what's going on with that? And do we have any interest in that building? Because we have one. It's not in the Grand Strand, but it is in there. And secondly, would y'all comment based on Hal's Charlotte, Greenville, or the Upstate, and Atlanta, what is the NISA footprint demographics? What is that for everybody's edification? I think that's important for us to understand. So basically two things. Where are we with the building on 319? Is anybody looking at it? Is it, because it's got high ceilings, I think. Should meet those parameters, I would expect.
You want to start?
Go ahead.
Let me just interject one thing, if I may. What he's talking about is we have 300 acres out there. How many?
About 250.
250 acres on 319 near Raynor for spec building. We have one spec building that's been built, and that's what Mr. Biddle is referring to. Is a spec building that's currently empty on 319. To you, Brad, or Jeff.
Let me answer the spec building question first from our perspective. We submit that spec building for a lot of different projects. I think it is viewed by a lot of different projects. Matter of fact, we've had some pretty significant activity on it in the last 6 months. So it gets you a lot of looks. It's probably one of the better marketing tools you have as far as getting actual clients to come in and take a look. Problem we've had, and I think crossing the hump to some degree, and I do think we're closer than we have been, is location of that building. I think when a lot of the folks come in and take a look at that building, they think it's going to be a lot closer to the services of the Grand Strand than it is, and so we've faced that challenge a little bit. I do think it is a good property, though, and it is an extremely good marketing tool for your folks here as far as getting folks on the ground. The NISA footprint is roughly, and what we're selling, the way we get into the doors, a lot of doors, is the fact that we can market about an 800,000 plus population strong. As Hal said, and we've actually had this happen to us. If we're trying to work with individual counties to make appointments for them to call on companies, if I tell them I'm representing about a 50,000 person population, doesn't resonate real well. If I say I'm representing about 800,000 people strong, I get a totally different response on the other end of the phone. Now, to carry that message further, and I don't know if you remember the quote from Mike Mullis that Hal had up on the screen. I've known Mike for 20 plus years. Used to get a lot of looks at Mike's projects when I was in different areas. And more recently, to tell you the kind of circles that he runs in, he located the Continental plant in Sumter. He located the GKN plant in Orangeburg. Caterpillar plant in Athens. So he keeps some pretty good company. He keeps the kind of company that we want in our house. Let's put it that way. Yep, that's Airbus. Yep. Last Friday or Thursday of last week, Thursday of last week, he was in Myrtle Beach for the SEDC conference. Sat down with him and said, Mike, talk to me. We need to get on your radar screen more. What do we need to do? He said, define your story a little bit more. And I said, what does that entail? And I mean, because I speak to him as often as I can and get some direction. He goes, what is your labor story? What is the true picture of eastern South Carolina? And he didn't say Myrtle Beach. He didn't say Florence. He didn't say Dillon. He said eastern South Carolina, because that's the way he sees it from a client standpoint, is we're one big labor pool. He said, give me some data, drill down in it, sell me a story. So and he had told me this, as a matter of fact, probably about 3 months ago. We're in the process now of defining that story for him through NISA. We've got a study underway that with a national labor consultant who is going to take each one of our county seats and do a 30, 60, 90-mile radius labor study. And quite honestly, in each one of those cases, it crosses, your labor pool crosses into another county. In some instances, and here as well, it crosses into other states. But that's the story the client wants to hear. It may not be the story we're comfortable selling because it has impact beyond our political boundaries sometimes, but when we're selling, we've got to put ourselves in their situation and say, you know, where am I going to draw the people that are going to make me money from? And that's that 30, 60, 90-mile radius. But when we're hearing it from the client, we're hearing it from the consultant, that's what we need to take back and put in place. So our footprint is roughly that 800,000 plus, but it extends well beyond that.
And certainly it would seem that the 30, 60, 90 does not have its center in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Because if you do it, 30, 60, 90 offshore is the fish.
Yeah.
And a few reefs and a lot of tires and a few boats. So you've got to move that center to the center of NISA, which is?
Well, geographically, I couldn't pinpoint it, but it's going to be somewhere between Chesterfield County and Georgetown County.
Okay, so that's where I'm going. I mean, if we got to rethink this whole piece, it would seem, if that's a critical component. I want to ask one other thing that has always concerned me about the quantitative analysis in the word jobs. Everybody's talking about where they've been. I just came back from California Thursday, Orange County, where I spoke to about 500. And I asked the question, I've asked it a lot in America, basically in every state. How many of you heard to get a good job, get a good education? And everyone's put their hand up, whether it's Orangeburg, Greenville, or Orange County, or Denver. But that's not true. Why would we tell young America, get a job, get a job, get a job, when it's more than that? So I get concerned as a businessman and an educator that we focus on jobs and not business startups, not entrepreneurs. My question is, when we do demographics for NISA, can we quantify the number of jobs started up with a guy, you know, in a van who's detailing cars? I mean, no, that's not a job, but it's a business. So are we, when we say the word jobs, I get really concerned that we narrow the scope to the one-lane path. We ought to be talking to young America about the one-lane path. We ought to be talking about self-employment. We ought to be talking about business owners. I mean, some of these kids in America started lawn mowing, and now they got a lawn service with 50 people working there. Well, I just get concerned that we're so stuck in this country on a job narrow focus that we don't focus on all of it. And in my opinion, we need more entrepreneurs. We need more people who have, you know, that vision, that they don't need to be told what to do every day by somebody. And so can we quantify that in Horry County? Can we quantify it in Georgetown? Can we quantify it in Nance? And how many business startups are there? Yeah, I agree there's no jobs. I agree the unemployment is 8.3 and worse. But what are we really talking about? Do we just axe those folks and act like they don't exist? Because I think they do. But how do we quantify it? And what's the way to do that? And why wouldn't we say, yeah, I know we're going from 315 to 1400 and a new announcement coming any minute, maybe today, I don't know. But my point is, how many people started a business right here in these communities, in NISA? How many people? Is it 50? Is it 5,000? I don't know how many it is. But I think we're not quantifying it, and I think we ought to. If we need the economists, and there's a bunch of them in this room, and a lot of you folks who do all this stuff, we need you there more than ever, in my opinion. And maybe it's all wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where America's going to have to go. You look at your figures, Hal, and that's what it's telling us. It's telling us you ought to be entrepreneurial. We ought to be teaching that at this university. I know we are. We ought to be talking about our graduates. We ought to be teaching it at Horry, Georgetown Tech. We ought to be teaching it everywhere. South Carolina State, you name it.
If I may, I cannot disagree. I mean, I cannot disagree with you at all. I think that you have a very valid point. Consequently, with that mindset in place, when Secretary Hitt came on as Secretary of Commerce, one of the things that he wanted to do as a focal point was to place more of an emphasis on small business development, entrepreneurial development. We had an effort in that area previously. We have beefed that area up considerably. It goes beyond just assisting those individuals who are looking to get into business, but more importantly, to get small businesses more business. If you can get a small businessman more business for his operation, he can become healthier, he'll employ more people, he will spin off into other areas. That's what we have placed a focal point on this year as a pilot. And I think that it's going to prove to be an ongoing program. Specifically with the two most recent larger announcements in Continental and Bridgestone, we have held subcontractor fairs, events, with representatives from the company, with representatives from the construction firms that are constructing those firms. How do we get some of that business for the small subcontractor? Not the guy that's got, that has an entourage of equipment, but what parts of that construction process can be broken down to a local contractor, as an example? What can those small vendors and those small businesses provide to the company in forms of services, in forms of materials or raw materials, if you will? JBE, small company, minority owned in Hartsville, was awarded a key contract for them with Boeing as a supplier. If we can get enough of those types of opportunities to raise their heads, and we think that we can, I think that we will be in a better position to answer just the same points and the same questions that you have.
If I could add real quick, Larry, I think you're exactly right. I think you have to have 3 stools to have an effective program. Recruitment is just one of those tools. Existing industry has to be another tool. As Hal mentioned, 80% of all the new jobs in the country aren't created by locating a Boeing into your community, but by getting out and supporting those that are already here and have invested here. And I think the third part of that stool is an entrepreneurial small business development program that we need to continue to pursue.
Can also, and I'll ask this question really out of ignorance, what are we doing, I guess, in the high schools to foster entrepreneurial thinking, or even before that? I know when I was coming up, the junior achievement and things like that were in place that actually, I don't say they glorify, but they glamorize, building a widget or the next new thing and taking it to market. And I'm not sure that, and it's not just a NISA region issue. I think it's perhaps nationwide. Do we foster risk anymore?
No.
And I can, but I can tell you, I've got a 16-year-old at home, just turned 17. He's not looking for the next big thing. He's looking for a summer CEO job. And I told you, there's very few of those out there. He doesn't want to, he doesn't want to spend his money on gas to push a lawnmower. Doesn't see the risk reward in that. So, I would say by the time we get them in the university system, you know, then they're talking about, you know, they don't have a Pell Grant, somebody's paying the tuition, they've got living expenses, and it's tough. So, I mean, are we fostering that?
No, we cater to weakness instead of built to strength across the country, and that's part of the challenge. But we ought to be talking about it. One of the challenges is far too many educators don't understand the system we're talking about. That's a sad scenario because they have jobs, and so they don't know anything to talk about except jobs, many of them. So you got to help them. We're working on helping them think differently, critically. That we do this. I mean, that's what America is.
I would add, if you take a look at your target strategies, and you know, they don't say target manufacturing strategies, they don't say target existing industry strategies, they say target industry strategies. So that can be everything from the two-person entrepreneur or startup firm to the 2,000 firm OEM. And you have to be able to look at the whole space and what's available. And when you're marketing in these spaces and you're marketing specifically to target industries, you're going to get a collection of all the above. Challenges, especially for the entrepreneur and the startups, is how are we providing, and if you take a real hard look at Silicon Valley, and you take a real hard look at Austin, and these are two areas that have been incredible in that entrepreneurial space and providing, you know, just an ecosystem, if you would, for companies to feed off of companies, ideas to feed off of each other. And there's really no other place other than in our area. RTP's done pretty well at it, but even if you look at RTP, Charlotte's done a better job than RTP has when you break it down for medical device oriented companies. We just took a look at this. But the challenge is making sure that if you get one, if you convince one that, and they want to be here, and they're going to make that decision on their own, okay, or their spouse makes that decision, right? There's always two places where decisions are made, boardrooms and bedrooms. And the fact is that you got to work on both. But when the decision is made, whether it's the CEO that makes the decision, whether it's the board, or whether it's the spouse driving location, geographic location, do you have the product available for that location? And if the answer is no, then you're going to have to work harder to get them. When there may be another community that has the same type of assets that you have that required that quality of life decision to be made, you know, they're going to weigh it out. How can we get into business quicker? And so we got to work on all aspects of it, from the culture in education to the physical infrastructure that we need to hold them, to that quality of life that's going to affect, you know, what I call pillow talk decisions. And it's.
Thank you, Hal. Sam?
I apologize if what I'm asking promotes negativity, but I wonder how other areas have met the challenge. When I first came here 26 years ago, some of the more prominent names in this community are now stigmatized with having contaminated soil and groundwater. Is that something that economic development is challenged with, to make sure that when we bring these people in, we monitor in such a way that it doesn't happen?
If I may take the first shot at that, that is always a standard part of what we do. Now, I say that and I follow it by saying this. Regulations that exist today from the environmental side are not the same regulations that were in place 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago. So what would have been acceptable in this place in time is not necessarily acceptable today. So their standards have changed, limits have changed, limits have risen. Now that's not to say that everybody is going to be clean throughout. But I will say in some cases it does have a tendency to get a little bit out of kilter, solely because regulations and limits change over the years, and folks are evaluated on what today's limits are as opposed to when they were in operation.
Do you remember the quote from Mike Mullis that I had up? It talked about desirable projects. A lot of times we have to look at every company when they come in and understand what are the issues that could arise from these companies. And when you take a look at the Upstate Alliance's target industry groups, when we talk about the advanced materials, chemicals play a big role in the advanced materials process. So, for example, most of the textile companies of yesteryear are now chemical companies. They're creating fibers chemically. So a lot of these facilities are going through transition, except for the new creation in their processes are all regulated by today's standards, not yesterday's standards. So anything new created may fit a little bit easier than what the old pieces were. Challenge is that there were a lot of existing businesses that we had in place that created stigmas that created some of these, and based on old regulations, it leaves a sour taste in our mouth for industry overall. All of them can't be weighed on what one did, because there were choices inside that organization or that corporation that made those decisions to do what they did. We have to monitor them, but that's part of our team process. That's part of being knocking on their door and inviting them to go to dinner, making them feel that they're part of the neighborhood. You can't change what's already been done, but certainly our states put regulations in process.
And every project that comes to the table is not necessarily a good fit, period, whether it be for the state or whether it be for the local community. The community has to be in a position to speak for itself. We'll give as much background information as we have to garner, but sometimes it's just not a good fit for a particular community or the state for that matter.
And don't be afraid to tell you no,
Yes,
say no.
It's nothing wrong with saying, thank you for considering us, but we don't think that you're a good fit for our area, and here are the reasons why. Every good deal is not, every opportunity is not a good deal.
Thank you. Dr. DeMott?
There's been a lot of talk about 73, has been for some time, and continues to be. And certainly, I could talk about the impact on tourism. A lot of people could talk about the impact on tourism. Goodwill make us move us to a tier 1 destination. But I'm wondering, and this is something I don't know, is there still discussion of potential regional air hub? And would that be more viable once 73 is in place? If you built an air hub somewhere between 95 and Florence, would it serve, to start with, air freight coming out of Wilmington, serving Florence, and certainly Myrtle Beach for tourism? What would be the impact of that bit of infrastructure? There's been a lot of discussion here today of infrastructure and regionalism. And what would be the impact of having an airport to serve for air freight in that area?
That'd be a Jeff question, maybe with
Can
Brad's
start, yeah,
help.
let me start. Dr. DeMott, let me start by giving you a sobering statistic that I work with every day. About 80% of all the projects looking at our state have to be within a mile of a major interstate, like Hal had mentioned earlier. You know, so Horry County is left to fight for the remaining 20% of all the projects. And oh, by the way, there's 46 counties in the state that are also fighting for those 20% as well. So it really gives us a disadvantage And I know this wasn't your question, but it's interesting for me because all I'm hearing in the community is the tourism benefit of I-73 and 29,000 new jobs and evacuation and all these other great things. People need to realize that that's going to move me into the game when it comes to projects that need to be on a major interstate that we're not even able to compete for. We never even get a phone call. And so I think it's important to think about traditional economic development opportunities that I-73 will bring to our community beyond tourism and evacuation. Regarding your airport question, we've looked at freight at ITAP as a potential use of that 450-acre tract out there that's former Air Force Base. Problem is you bring in all this cargo and they have to disseminate it among the region and we have no interstate. So you're introducing tractor trailers onto 17 and 501 that are already burdened with tourist traffic. So I like your idea. I think if we do that, it does need to shift to the 95 corridor that's closer to that interstate.
The only thing I would say is there's a study that was delivered. We performed a study on behalf of, I guess, or at the direction of Horry County Council and FAA, and that was delivered about 3 months ago that has more detailed information about regional airports than I could ever know or want to know, but that's available if someone wants to take a look at it.
What was the general consensus of what they were saying, Jeff?
I don't know that there was ever a pure recommendation one way or the other, but I think it was a compilation of facts. You know, this is what other regional airports have done. If you choose to go this direction, this is kind of the expectations you could receive. Something kind of like that.
Okay, we're reaching a time when everybody's going to get hungry. And I'd like to, first of all, again, thank the panel for being here with us. Having gone from here to Columbia many times for things such as this, I can understand why Maceo and Hal, I especially thank them for taking the time to be with us. So I'll turn the program back over to Dr. Byron.
Well, I'm going to do it from down here, actually. Really, this program is designed and put together by Gary Hawkins. Did an outstanding job. He really deserves